Daddy. The little girl's voice cut through the restaurant like a gunshot. Every conversation stopped. The 6-year-old slipped from her mother's hand and sprinted across the room toward a broad-shouldered man standing near the entrance. He froze. Then she crashed into his legs and wrapped both arms around him. The man stared down at her, completely stunned. "I'm sorry," the girl whispered, looking up at him. "I knew you'd come back." Across the restaurant, Billionaire CEO Claire Bennett slowly stood from her table. Her face had gone white, because the man her daughter had just called Daddy was supposed to be a complete stranger. And this was supposed to be a blind date. 2 hours earlier, Claire had considered canceling. At 38, she had built Bennett Medical Technologies from a tiny laboratory into one of the fastest-growing healthcare companies in America. She could negotiate a multi-million-dollar acquisition without blinking. But dating? That terrified her. Her younger sister had arranged the blind date, insisting Claire needed someone who wasn't impressed by money or intimidated by success. So Claire reluctantly walked into the upscale Chicago restaurant with her 6-year-old daughter, Lily. The man waiting for them was named Daniel Reed, 39, former Navy SEAL, now working as an emergency response contractor and volunteer search and rescue trainer. He wasn't wearing an expensive suit, just a dark blue jacket, worn boots, and a simple watch. Claire immediately noticed the scar along his jaw. She also noticed something else. He wasn't looking at her. He was watching Lily, not in a creepy way, in the way someone watches a child standing too close to the edge of a staircase. Claire sat down. "Daniel." He smiled politely. "Claire." "Yes." He glanced at Lily. "She's got your eyes." Claire's expression tightened. She didn't like strangers commenting on her daughter. Daniel noticed. "Sorry. Bad habit." The date began awkwardly. Claire ordered sparkling water. Daniel ordered coffee. She asked about his work. He answered simply, "I help train emergency teams and volunteer with search and rescue." No bragging. No dramatic war stories. That somehow irritated Claire even more. She was used to men trying to impress her. Daniel seemed determined not to. After 10 minutes, Claire leaned toward her sister's direction in the universe and thought, "This is ridiculous." Then Daniel noticed Lily struggling to open a tiny packet of crackers. Without interrupting the conversation, he reached over, opened it, and handed it back. "Thanks," Lily said. Daniel smiled. "Anytime." Claire stared at him. "You're good with kids." Daniel's smile disappeared for half a second. "Some things are easier with kids." She didn't understand what he meant. Then her phone rang. Her CFO. A crisis at the company. Claire stepped away to answer. When she returned, Daniel was gone. For one strange second, she felt offended. Then she saw him outside through the restaurant window. He was kneeling beside an elderly delivery driver whose bicycle had fallen over. Daniel had stopped the date to help him. Claire watched silently as he lifted the bicycle, checked the man's bleeding hand, and called an ambulance. When Daniel came back inside, Claire looked embarrassed. "I thought you left." "I almost did." "Why?" He glanced toward the window. "Because that man needed help more than I needed dessert." It was the first thing he said that made Claire smile. Then Lily spoke. "Mommy." "Yes." "Why does he smell like Daddy?" Claire's smile vanished. Daniel went completely still. Daniel had served overseas for 8 years. But he had never told Claire the worst part. His final mission had ended with his closest teammate dying while Daniel was trying to get him out. That teammate had been Lily's biological father, Michael Bennett, Claire's late husband. Daniel had known Michael before Claire ever met him. But there was more. Michael hadn't died immediately. He had survived long enough to give Daniel a small metal bracelet, one engraved with Lily's initials. "Give this to my daughter," Michael had whispered. Daniel had tried. But when he returned to America, he discovered Claire had been told a different story. She had been told Michael died instantly, and Daniel had been told the family wanted no contact with anyone from the unit. So he kept the bracelet. For 6 years. Until tonight. Daniel sat down again. His hands trembled slightly. Claire noticed. "Who are you?" Daniel looked at Lily. Then at Claire. "I knew your husband." Claire's heart stopped. "You knew Michael?" "Yes." "Why didn't you tell me?" "Because I didn't know how." Claire's voice dropped. "Tell me now." Daniel reached into his jacket. He placed a small silver bracelet on the table. Lily's initials were engraved on it. Claire recognized it instantly. She had bought that bracelet for Michael before he left on his final deployment. Her eyes filled. He was wearing that when he died. Daniel nodded. "I took it from him." Claire looked horrified. "You were there?" "Yes." Silence. Then came the second shock. He wasn't alone, Daniel said quietly. And he didn't die the way you were told. Claire couldn't breathe. Michael had spent his final minutes asking about Lily. He had been afraid she would grow up believing he abandoned her. Daniel had promised him she would know the truth. But military bureaucracy had buried the details. Claire had spent 6 years grieving the wrong story. Then Lily suddenly grabbed Daniel's hand. You're the man from my dreams. Claire stared at her. What? Lily's little face crumpled. Daddy told me he'd come home. Daniel closed his eyes. He understood. Years earlier, Claire had shown Lily old photographs of Michael. Lily had built a child's version of her father in her imagination. And somehow, Daniel's voice, posture, and the bracelet had triggered something she couldn't explain. She wasn't actually recognizing Daniel as her father. She was recognizing the connection. The realization broke something inside Claire. For years, she had protected Lily by avoiding every painful conversation about Michael. She had thought silence was kindness. It wasn't. It had only left Lily with questions. But Daniel had one final secret. He hadn't accepted the blind date because he wanted romance. Claire discovered that when he quietly admitted, "Your sister contacted me." Claire frowned. "My sister?" She said you needed someone who understood what it meant to lose Michael. Claire stood. So this entire date was arranged? No. Daniel shook his head. She asked me to meet you. I almost refused. Why? Because I didn't want to become another person in your life who was there because of Michael. Claire looked at him for a long moment. And now? Daniel glanced at Lily. Now I think she deserves to know the people who loved her father. That sentence finally broke Claire. Not dramatically. She simply sat down and cried. The CEO who had negotiated billion-dollar deals couldn't stop one quiet tear from falling onto the table. Daniel didn't touch her. He just stayed. That was what she needed. Months passed. Claire didn't fall instantly in love with Daniel. Neither did Daniel suddenly become Lily's replacement father. Instead, they built something much harder. Trust. Daniel began helping at Lily's school during emergency preparedness days. Claire started volunteering at Daniel's rescue training center. Lily kept calling him Danny. Sometimes she still called him Daddy by accident. The first time it happened again, Daniel looked terrified. Claire simply smiled. Let her decide what that word means. And she did. 1 year later, Lily stood beside Daniel at a memorial ceremony for fallen service members. She held the silver bracelet in her palm. Then she placed it against Daniel's hand. You kept Daddy's promise, she said. Daniel swallowed hard. I tried. Lily hugged him. Claire watched from a few feet away. She finally understood something she had spent years resisting. Daniel hadn't come into their lives to replace Michael. He had come carrying a piece of him home. And sometimes, love isn't about finding someone who fills an empty space. Sometimes it's about finding someone brave enough to sit beside you while you learn to live with it. Because the people we lose don't disappear when their story ends. Sometimes, they live on through the promises someone else refuses to break.